Well, yeah, we can start talking about Vana. Sorry, I was just
No
asking
no worries.
lots of questions.
You asked about my story. What about your story?
Well, okay, so you got into crypto 2013. I don't know
Correct.
if I had heard. I only knew about centralized currencies then, and so I had like a pretty extreme interest in like central banks and generally currency as the central point of the economy. So I had a picture of Janet Yellen in my high school bedroom, like worked at the Fed in high school, and was like basically
really into TradFi.
Yeah, like currency is central to it all. Not even like it was specifically central banks and currency. Like the whole financial industry was less interesting to me. Currency was just the thing that underpinned all of it. And then got to MIT and learned about decentralized currencies. So there was like a 5-person MIT Bitcoin club we were all quite like radical, very like ideological in terms of why we cared about a sovereign currency. And started like mining ETH right around the time when it was coming out, and a bunch of us from the MIT Bitcoin Club would just set up rigs to mine in our dorm rooms. Yeah, we would go get.
I did that for a while too. It's very intricate and fascinating.
Yeah,
I learned a lot about the space doing that myself too, just putting all that stuff together and kind of trying to figure out how to mine on some of the different algorithms. And
totally. I mean, what's cool is like you're literally running part of the blockchain, right?
Yeah.
Like what better way to get involved in the space and learn about it than to operate part of the chain?
You help them bring it into existence. Nothing more fulfilling.
I think too, as like a college student with no money, a way of earning, right? Like I think we don't really have. Now a lot of systems are proof of stake, and we kind of moved away from proof of work, and I like miss those days because it let anybody come in of just if you have a GPU, or even early on if you can mine on a CPU, right? You're able to participate in like creating new blocks.
I mined with my CPU. I think the last time I tried doing that was maybe 2013 or 2014.
Okay.
Because you could run a node on your computer.
Yeah.
And I could download a full like Bitcoin or Ethereum client. And it would run just fine because the network was very small back then. But very quickly you needed GPUs because you needed more computing power just to really participate if you wanted to earn a couple dollars. And then that phased out pretty quickly too. So the evolution of that has been quite insane. And proof of work, those were fun days, but now it's all about staking and yield farming, and who knows what comes after that.
And so following that, I was at CSAIL, which is MIT's AI lab, doing some research just while I was an undergrad, and came across the world of like AI. I was interested in it from an econometrics perspective. Like I like to model, just different data sets and stuff, and saw machine learning as a way to kind of scale that. And then got really interested in the way some of these AI model architectures worked, and kind of went down the AI rabbit hole, which is what then brought me to creating Vana. So what Vana is kind of a way for people to pool their data together to create AI models that they all jointly own, right? So today, if you interact with ChatGPT, really it's trained on data from all across the public internet, right? And AI models are only as good as the data that they're trained on. So if you can bring together more data, you can actually create even better AI models. So on Vana, there are these different data DAOs. Each one has its own dataset specific token. And each data DAO is really like a standalone business, right? So the guy who started the LinkedIn data DAO actually used to work at LinkedIn selling LinkedIn data, then kind of joined Coinbase, went down the crypto rabbit hole. Some of the folks building the Twitter one are also out of MIT, but really kind of bringing the data out of these walled gardens of big tech today, and then allowing users to decide what happens to it, whether it's training AI models or even kind of treating it as a traditional like data union, similar to a labor union, and using it
to sell
negotiate.
It back to the company.
To sell it back, or even to just negotiate. So like following the Reddit data DAO, Reddit actually changed their terms of service. And people saw that as a response to the Reddit data DAO. In the same way, I think the 23andMe DAO right now is advocating for 23andMe to change their terms of service to make them more friendly to users. And so you kind of have some negotiating power that comes from the data set as well.
Yeah, it's been a very pervasive industry, data, big data in particular, with a lot of these companies. And not that they're all bad or anything, but it's like, as an individual in 2024, almost 2025, like we live in a period of time where data is so fluid and everywhere.
Yeah.
And, you know, so much money is being made off of it. And it almost kind of sucks as an individual to know that all these advertisers are paying big money to know what my favorite flavor of ice cream is.
Yeah.
And you start to wonder, well, wait, can I sell that myself? Like, why can't I get a piece of that? That is my own personal information. And it's like, you're getting very particular in who I am, and you're throwing ads in my face, and who knows who you're selling that to for an extra buck. And it's probably about time that there is some kind of intermediary that comes in there that can, you know, whether it's in the form of a DAO or some way to streamline data to individuals and help them get reimbursed for it. You know, I think that's, you know, something that has to take place at this point in time. I think most people are craving it now, and those models are very interesting. So this one's interesting too.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fear today about AI sort of taking jobs, right? And like, hey, is AI going to be able to like do my job in a year, in 2 years, and how's that going to impact like the economy?
What do you think? Do you think it will?
I mean, I think that there is going to be like some major labor disruption, but I think what's important is like, if AI is trained on your data, if you've taught AI how to do your job, then you should just own that AI, right? Sure. And if you have the right ownership system in place, then you're actually excited, right? Of like, hey, AI is going to scale me. Whereas if you don't, and you have had your data kind of taken to train AI models, then AI is more replacing you.
You probably saw this too. There was a labor strike on the West Coast, not the West Coast, East Coast, excuse me, in the US not that long ago, just about a week ago. And it was over the same kind of stuff, right? Because you look in China and some other places in the world, and some of these ports, you know, are completely automated. Like there's really no human involvement except for maybe some managerial tasks and overseeing the equipment or maybe doing maintenance. And, you know, I can understand the scare with it, but there's so many different jobs that have just gone irrelevant over time because of technological innovation, but they've also been replaced by new things. Like the horse and the shoeing business was replaced by the car, right? The kerosene and candle business was replaced by, you know, electrical appliances, and you know, over time these things just get replaced by new technologies and new jobs kind of get inserted into them. So I think there's a little bit of a misconception with AI just taking all of our jobs, and certain tech automating away all our jobs. It's a small truth. In reality, people will just adjust, I think.
Yeah, I think we're in for like a very big economic shift over the next 10 years. And I think our view is that data is really what underpins all of it, right? Ultimately, AI models are only as good as their training data. And so kind of having the ability to like own that data, have exposure to that core input to AI is really important as that economic shift plays out.
Do you guys have any existing use cases where that's been done already that maybe you can kind of highlight to kind of paint a picture for some people?
Yeah. I think a lot of people just don't realize how valuable their data is, right? So like one use case I think is really helpful as a reference is like, there is a Fortune 500 fashion company that can buy your Spotify and fashion data for $25, which is actually a fair amount of money, right? I mean, it's not like hundreds of dollars, but it's a lot more than you might think your Spotify or your fashion data is worth. And the reason why it's worth so much is if you sold your Spotify data on its own, that might be worth like 30 cents. But because you're combining data across different data sources, where you're bringing in both your kind of music preferences and the sorts of like clothes you like to wear, then you're able to kind of allow them to train an AI model that is predictive of, hey, based on what sort of music you listen to, this is what you might want to wear. And so that makes your data much more valuable. So that's one of the cases I would point to. The other one I'd mention is the Reddit data DAO, which saw 140,000 users join with their Reddit data. And if you were a Reddit user with a lot of karma, because you're getting rewarded based on how much karma you have, it's like the square root of your karma. You actually could earn like $300 or $400 for your Reddit data. And so at the beginning, when a lot of these data DAOs launch, a lot of the sort of financial motivation for people coming in is somewhat speculative, because they're coming in, they're contributing their data, and the data DAO has set out their tokenomics to say this is how we're going to reward people. In the case of the Reddit data DAO, that allowed for people to be able to come in and, if they wanted to sell their data, earn a fair amount for it. And then over time, that shifts from being purely speculative to actually being, hey, like now they're able to kind of sell the data set in this way and kind of buy back the token. But that's generally done at the data DAO level. So it depends a lot. That Vana itself is a layer 1 blockchain that's designed to work with this private data and for these AI use cases. But we ourselves aren't kind of like operating those data set tokens, but we're supporting the folks who are building them out.
Okay. What do you think about the economical benefits of it too? Because, you know, when someone takes your data, like a big tech company, you know, aggregates your data, you know, it's kind of, you know, an assumption-based process, right? Where they're assuming that your favorite ice cream is vanilla. They're assuming that, you know, you like to go on runs in the afternoon or whatever it may be. But for them to pay you directly, or for an individual to be compensated and then them provide 100% accurate data for some kind of accommodation, then it's more valuable, I think, plus for an advertiser, because you're going to stimulate the economy a lot more. People are actually going to see ads that they probably will interact with and probably actually purchase more. You'll probably see e-commerce take a huge uptick simply because you're not getting spammed the same Anchor charger or a nugget ice maker. Like I see it all the time and I don't want it. And I can't turn it off, and it's annoying. And I wish they would just show me like a shampoo I like or some cool shoes that maybe I buy that they should be able to figure out at this point. And I feel like it's more stifling than if they just directly compensate an individual, because you get better information, more quality data, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like if you align incentives, you can actually get much better data. I think one example of this is the 23andMe DAO, where they are having people first pool their genetic data because they want to advocate for their data rights. They don't want their data to be sold as part of 23andMe's potential acquisition or whatever may happen to that company. But on top of that, they're able to have people add more data in and actually add like their healthcare background. So then you can understand, hey, based on this genome sequence, like this rare disease is more likely, right? So if you have the users have true kind of economic ownership, then they're incentivized to say, hey, I want to make this data more valuable, instead of the deal we have today, which is kind of like, oh, like I want to use this product, and so I guess I'll have to just be willing to like pay the price in my data, which is generally how products work today.
What is your objective here at Permissionless for Vana? Are you looking for partnerships and collaborations? Are you participating as like a speaker or panelist or doing anything like that? What are some of the things you're doing while you're here?
Yeah, so yesterday I was giving a talk on like breaking through the data wall. And so the data wall is a term that AI researchers use to refer to the fact that we're running out of data, right? And that talk was for an audience that's focused purely on decentralized AI. It's actually a lot of folks who kind of I already know, and it's kind of like catching them up on some of what we're building. And then some of the like latest developments in the ecosystem, and some new people too. Like I'd say the audience, a third of them like were familiar with Vana, and then maybe 2/3 new to Vana. And then later today, speaking at Permissionless, like the main conference, on a panel about data is the new oil, right? So really talking about that, how important data is to AI, and what the future of Vana looks like, and kind of more broadly the future of decentralized AI.
I've heard that term a lot here, decentralized AI.
Yeah.
Can you kind of explain that a little bit in a nutshell?
Yeah. Today, what most people are familiar with is centralized AI, right? Which is a single company trains an AI model. And people don't realize, but these AI models are like really expensive to build, right? So it can cost like $100 million. I think people expect the bigger models that are coming out to be like $1 billion plus in terms of compute, data, research.
Yeah, let alone the storage and the electricity costs and the resources that it uses. It's insane.
Yeah, so a huge amount of input goes into these models. And today they're just trained by centralized companies, right? So OpenAI with ChatGPT, Anthropic with Claude, Google has theirs as well. And so what decentralized AI is a different model of creating AI models where rather than a centralized entity controlling it, kind of like the central bank with currency, it is a decentralized approach, right? So kind of like Ethereum or Bitcoin with currency. And the way that actually works is you have a group of distributed people who are contributing resources, right? So that's compute, that's data. And what's really powerful about it is that decentralized systems can aggregate a lot of resources, right? So if you compare the compute that was required to train ChatGPT to the compute that all the Ethereum miners in the proof of work days had, Ethereum miners have like 50 times more compute, right? So you're actually, through kind of these decentralized systems, able to mobilize a lot of resources in the form of compute, data, in order to train really powerful AI models. And then those AI models are owned by the community, right? So rather than having a single company, maybe you've run into this, like when I use Claude, Anthropic's model sometimes to ask for help with crypto-related things, it'll tell me, hey, crypto is unethical, I can't help you with this, right? And so in a centralized AI world, one company decides the censorship sort of, hey,
like
what
the parameters put on it, what to touch on, what not to.
Yeah, what is it not allowed to talk about? And also what is true, right? It gets to decide like, hey, when Anna asks about the morals of cryptocurrency, I'm going to say this, right? But that could be different from what most people think because it's just up to that one company. Whereas with decentralized AI, it's everyone who contributed to the model who gets to decide, right? So then it's a much more democratic process of like, hey, what do we think truth should be, right? I think one example that kind of contrasts centralized AI versus decentralized AI is if you look at centralized AI there was this case where Google had released an AI model, Bard. And if you would ask Bard, hey, paint me a historically accurate picture of like a medieval king, they would show you like an Indian woman, right? And they had put these layers on top to make it more, I don't know, aligned with their social views. And they ended up apologizing and thought it was a mistake. And I think a lot of people kind of laughed about it and were like, oh, it's like this crazy wokeness, right, of the 2020s. But I think if we didn't have another source of truth, right, like if we didn't have Google and know that that was wrong or some other place to look, that would just become true for us, right? And I think that's like really scary as we start to get more and more information from AI. Like whoever decides what the AI says is literally just deciding truth in our society, right? So in a centralized world, you're relying on a single entity to do that. Whereas with decentralized AI, you're relying on a collective group of people, right? In the same way that Bitcoin and Ethereum aren't relying on a single central bank, they're relying on everybody who's running nodes. You kind of get those same strong guarantees in a decentralized AI world.
Yeah, that bias is very prevalent in big tech AI and centralized AI today. Obviously, there's been plenty of examples of it, especially with Google's I think it was Gemini too, Bard and Gemini.
Oh yeah, you're right.
And I love Gemini. Gemini is really good, but it was a little funny to ask it to create a picture of a Viking, and then it'd come out Indian or African American. It's like, I know that they're trying to, pin their social views in there a little bit, and it's fine generally. But like, if I need something historically accurate, and I need relevancy, then it becomes very problematic. And then small things can also cascade into bigger problems in the future. You don't want bias in a system. You want a true system. And I think that's hard to do if you have a centralized entity that isn't representative of an entire community, but of fragmentation or a partial part of a community or even half of a community. So this idea of decentralized AI does make a lot of sense. And I think having a whole community kind of congregated around building it and having these different inputs, would make it a lot better, I think.
Yeah, and I think the trade-off of like, hey, do you want to contribute some of your data to own part of the next ChatGPT is very compelling for a lot of users, right? I think that people see that AI is becoming the source of economic power, right? Like OpenAI hit $3.4 billion in revenue, right? That's a huge amount of money that's coming from centralized AI. And it's actually possible to build even better AI models using the decentralized approach, right? Where you have a community owning models and a community contributing data in a much kind of more fast-paced, iterative way.
Where can people go to learn more? Website? Do you guys have social media?
Yeah,
community?
Website, Twitter. Yeah, our Twitter is @with Vana, and then website vana.org. We've got lots of you can go to our Discord if you're a developer and kind of want to get help building a data DAO, and then you can look at our technical documentation as well.
Cool. And then do you guys have a roadmap? Anything exciting coming up going into 2025 that you think people should be aware of?
Yeah, I think I know. So the Vana Foundation is getting up to kind of progressively decentralize the network, which involves kind of launching mainnet, kind of standing up the full layer 1. And so that's definitely an exciting update, and then all the different data DAOs launching on top of it. And as a user, what's cool about that is each of those data DAOs like offer an opportunity for you to earn ownership in the future of AI, right? And so you can contribute your data and get ownership on part of that data set. And then you can decide, hey, which data sets are going to be most important for AI, right? And so those are some of the updates I'm most excited about.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing all those come out, and I will be following Vana very closely. So let's do another episode in the near future. And best of luck. I know you're traveling probably the next day, right? Back to Boston.
Yeah. So I'm based in San Francisco and headed to Boston just for an event at MIT tomorrow. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, safe travels. Enjoy the rest of Permissionless, and hopefully our path cross again before you leave. And if not, take care.
Okay, great chatting.
It's been great.